What's up, ladies and gentlemen? We have Brad Davison joining the show, the Wisconsin Badger three-point king, and now in his third year overseas. Brad, welcome to the show. How are you doing? And as we get started, would you mind giving fans back home in America an update on what you've been up to the last few months or the last few years? Because I know you're a soon-to-be expected father. You got a lot of exciting stuff going on. So yeah, what's the update?
You got it, Matt. I appreciate you having me on the podcast and looking forward to the conversation. Life is good. Yeah, we're in our third year playing professionally overseas. Year one after I got done at Wisconsin was in Lithuania. Then my second season was in Alicante, Spain. And both those years I was traveling with my wife and we were both playing professional basketball in the same cities. Last year for the same club, first year for different clubs but in nearby cities. So kind of living the loving basketball dream. My wife and I
Yes,
both
sir.
play professional basketball together. And now this season we're in Santiago de Compostela, Spain. So the northwest coast of Spain. My wife is not playing this year because, as you alluded to, we're getting ready to welcome our first baby girl in T
Let's go.
minus 7 to 8 days, God
Oh,
willing. So I'm
wow.
actually bags are packed. I'm on call to fly across the world to try to, God willing, make it there for the birth and delivery, to be there for my daughter and my wife coming up really, really soon. So there's our update.
Yeah, no, man, congratulations. That's awesome. And yeah, just talk a little bit more. Just like, were you guys in the same organization for a year playing professionally? Just talk about how fun that was, just playing overseas with your wife. I mean, that's unbelievable. Not many people get to do that.
Yeah, it was incredible. So to start, in last year in Spain, we were in different clubs, but my wife was actually commuting about 55 minutes to and from practice each day. So she did that for the first 2, 3 months. And then an opportunity opened up where she could come play for the same club that I was playing for. And so it became a lot more convenient for us. We
Yeah,
were in the same weight room, played in the same gym, all part of the same club, wore the same jerseys, all of the above. And so it really worked out perfectly, and we had an absolute blast. We really enjoyed the city we were in. Basketball, we had a great experience. But even most importantly, you realize as you play the game of basketball and travel around the country and now the world, what makes it worth it and so enjoyable is the people. And we were surrounded by incredible people in terms of teammates, coaches, fans, the community. So it was a great experience, and we loved every moment of it.
let's go. And for people watching this, and we'll dive right back into the conversation. The roadmap for this, get the update from Brad, and kind of talk about his journey. Also, pick his mind a little bit, get his mentality on some things. And I've always admired Brad's attitude from afar. And yeah, the goal moving forward. I've taken a little break from the show, but the goal moving forward as I grow is I want to. Sports are great, but sports can also be a little trivial at times, and I want to dive into some deeper things moving forward. I mean, obviously, I'm not Joe Rogan, but I see what Joe Rogan does, where he can talk about the stuff he's really passionate about with the UFC, talk about sports, but he can also go a little bit deeper. So the goal is to go a little bit deeper, and I think Brad's got some really cool perspectives on a lot of different topics. So I'm going to ask him, I think, some good questions. Let's take it to Wisconsin now. Just starting at Wisconsin, something that you're well known for being is a leader, and you were a leader from day one when you were 18. And I know you're kind of younger for your age, on the younger side, April birthday. So it's not easy just to walk in when you got 21, 22, 23-year-olds alongside you. But where does that confidence to be a leader, because it takes confidence to be a leader at such a young age in that situation, where does that confidence come from, and where did those leadership skills come from?
I think my leadership skills would have been developed at a very young age in terms of being involved in a lot of different sports and being involved on a lot of different teams. Having my parents as coaches and having sisters as role models that I always looked up to. But from a young age, I always played up. When I was a second grader, I played with the third graders, fourth graders, and I did that for a couple years starting out. So there was a comfortability I had with being the younger person on the team to the point where I was so comfortable with it. It's not really something that I think about a whole lot.
Sure.
You think of yourself as a member of the team, and as a member of the team, you want to do everything you can to help your team win, but also you want to develop relationships with everyone on the team, no matter if they're a fifth year senior or a freshman who just walked into the program. So I think the confidence, first of all, just came from a comfortability and from an experience aspect, is then going into high school and having the opportunity to play both football and basketball as when I was a freshman and playing with juniors and seniors, and
Sure.
trying to develop those relationships and earn their respect, being the younger player. So I think from a young age, it was something that I had the opportunity and the blessing to really work on and to experience, even without the idea of really labeling it leadership. It was more
Sure.
just labeling it as, be a great teammate, work as hard as you can, set a good example, and all those different things, define leadership in their own way. And so then that has become something that I've tried to pride myself on, no matter where I'm at or uh, what country or level I'm playing at.
Yeah. And a lot of those leadership skills, I imagine, also come from your faith. You're an outspoken man of faith. And something I admire is obviously UW-Madison. I know you loved it there. You loved your time. You loved the city. You loved the people, the community. You were very involved. But it's a very secular university. And was it ever difficult for you to be an outspoken Christian in that environment?
Yeah, for me and my faith, it's the foundation of my life. And to me, it's all about a relationship that I have with God through Jesus and what He did for us and what He's done for us. And so for me, it was always such a important aspect of my life that I didn't worry about the environment I was in. I didn't worry about the campus I was on or anything else that was going on around me. But for me, it was always something that I wanted to work on internally. And as you develop in your faith and as you grow that relationship, God turns you outward. And instead of worrying about the environment that you're in, I believe that we're called to environments to set the environment and to lead by example. And you do that through loving people and developing relationships and um, serving others. And so for me, I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about the environment that I was in or different things that were going on around me. It was more about control what I can control. And I heard saying, like, be the thermostat, not the thermometer.
Sure.
Um, we're not born to, biblically speaking, we're in this world, but we're not of this world. We're called to go into this world, but also we're called to be set apart. And so I saw it as an opportunity, an extreme blessing, and a responsibility to connect with my teammates, to shine as bright as I could, and to be intentional with having those conversations and creating an environment where my teammates were comfortable, they felt loved, they felt welcomed, and then just going from a relationship to then having an intentional conversation about who God is and who Jesus is and what He's done for us and what God is continuing to do in all of our lives, whether we know it or not.
Sure. And throughout college, I imagine you had some moments that maybe tested your faith a little bit, or just some moments that were difficult to go through. Because, in my opinion, you were treated unfairly. You were a very polarizing figure throughout college, and it wasn't just Big Ten or local media who may give you a hard time. I mean, you had times where you had ESPN, you had national media that would come after you, like that ridiculous. Actually, I'll just call it ESPN. It's a total joke. ESPN, I'm not a big fan of, but ESPN ran that Wikipedia page nonsense in the middle of a game, which was ridiculous. You had Bomani Jones roasting you for taking charges and sealing a win against NC State, and you were very mature from a young age. You were a leader at a young age for Wisconsin, but that had to be tough. How did you handle such disrespect and some hate from the outside sources at such a young age?
It was very challenging, to be frank and to be honest with you, especially during that time of my life, still trying to find myself, still trying to, plant my roots into a firm foundation and having an understanding of what that means. Looking back on it, I'm very thankful for those trials and for those times because it's made me who I am and it's given me the perspective I have on life. But for me, what got me through was an incredible community around me that instead of always talking about what was being said about me or the perception that I had or the polarization, you can pick your term, I probably had it at some point in my career. They directed me towards the truth, and the truth is in God's word, and it's about what God says about me. And so my identity is not and what the world thinks or what the world sees or what the world defines by. But man, I try to adopt the identity of my biblical identity of what God says about me, and that's not just me, but you and everyone who's listening. That we're valued, that we're chosen, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, that we're more than conquerors, that we're overcomers, and all those different biblical identities that we have that we can, adopt through faith got me through. And the reason why I was able to fix my gaze away from the world and what was being said and back towards that truth was because of the community that I had around me that I'm so grateful for, and that they continued to guide me through different areas of life. There was quite a few different things I dealt with when I'll never forget. I got a direct message from Dick Vitale after a game in regards to the Wikipedia page, and he messaged my mom apologizing for what took place because he was
As
doing
he
the
should.
game.
As he
Yeah,
should.
it was my senior year, and I was like, well, it took 4 years, but I someone's seen the light from the other side. And I have a lot of different stories like that. That now with some perspective, you look back and you can, giggle about. But at the time, there's some dark moments. Those are the highs and lows, or the hills and valleys of a being an athlete in on the brightest stage and the brightest lights. And um, thankfully now, with the perspective that I have, I'm very thankful for it, because I believe that testing of my faith, ultimately it strengthens your faith. And there's a verse that
100%.
comes to mind, like, rejoice in your suffering, because that suffering produces perseverance. That perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And during all that, I think those tough times taught me how to persevere, taught me how to
Yeah.
endure, built my character, and ultimately fixed my gaze on the hope that we have in Jesus, and the hope that I can put into God's promises and God's faithfulness, and ultimately into the identities that He has for me, and not of the world.
100%. I think that is great. I think in life, typically, if everything's just smooth sailing your whole life, it's not going to make you better. I feel like in life you need those up and downs. The up and downs will come. If they haven't come yet, they will come down the road. You need those up and downs to persevere, to get tougher. I look at the hard times in my life, and I'm thankful for them as well, because I think they made me a much better person. And they're just, it's a necessity in life. Like, even as a Christian, like, you're not guaranteed to have an easy life all because you have faith in God. And you got to go through these hard times, and those hard times are what molds you. I'm a firm believer in that. So I think that's a great perspective from you. But yeah, as a, I try not to come off as a fan in my interviews, but I definitely rocked with you through your college career, and I was heated over some of this stuff. So I can only imagine what it was like for you and your friends and your family. So yeah. Um, I do feel like, yeah, the outside noises did help you play better at some points in your career. Maybe a little bit later on, but I one of my favorite games from you was your 5th year at Indiana. It was a heated game. I know I believe then fiance was in the stands, and they were going at her, they were going at you. I can't remember the guy's name who they called kind of a soft technical, in my opinion, and then he kind of lost his composure, and you hit some big shots down the stretch. But yeah, not to get off on a tangent, but that was one of my favorite games I watched from you, because you took all the heat that was coming at you and you got the dub, and yeah, I think it was great. And I think you drew a charge later in the game. I think you drew a charge after on that same guy who was kind of going back and forth with you. He lowered your shoulder, you're ready for it, took it. But do you feel like those outside noises and some of the hate that you got, that you embraced it and it kind of helped you find another level out on the court?
Definitely when I was on the court. When I was off the court, as I went through my college career, I had all sorts of boundaries that I put on myself to try to eliminate it. Because as much as I can adopt all these things and believe all these things and tell myself all these things, when you're hearing all the outside noise, I don't believe people who say when they hear it that doesn't register, they don't think about it. So
Yeah.
I did my best to set boundaries in terms of keeping that outside noise outside, in terms of limiting social media, not reading articles, not looking at messages. Sometimes some messages were harder to not receive than others. But I had certain boundaries in play to when I wasn't on the court, keeping it away from sight, out of mind. But when I was on the court, it was something that I really enjoyed,
Yeah.
something that I really looked forward to. I always enjoyed road games more than home games because I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. And so kind of to go off that, and my wife now knows that. And so going back to the Indiana game, one of the things that was so special about it for our relationship, and again, my wife was treated very poorly at that game by the fans in person, by people on social media, by articles, by all these different things that to me logically makes no sense. You think
100%. Yeah.
she's going to go to her fiance's game and not cheer for her fiance? People
Yeah.
thought it was like, again, there's a lack of logic sometimes.
Yeah, that's what
Um,
fans do,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. But apparently she betrayed Indiana. She's supposed to betray her husband and not Indiana. So I was, yeah. Usually, and I would never say anything or do anything back. And that was one of the hardest moments in my life to swallow and not say something in terms of this is ridiculous. Like, but my wife is my better judgment there, and I stayed off everything after the game. I didn't say anything. But okay, that's a tangent. But anyways, going back to
Oh
that
no,
game.
let it fly. I mean, we're a few years removed now. You can let it fly, Brad.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. Man, I know there's all these different people that want to do podcasts and reach out for articles to get my perspective on it, and I was
Sure.
like, I was ready to give it. Like, what? I'm never going back to Assembly Hall to play. I do love Assembly Hall. I think it's the best arena in the Big Ten. So, but I just thought she was treated so poorly, and if anyone
100%.
else was in that situation, it's not even something you'd think about. It's just what you do, and it's a
Yeah.
game. Like it's not nothing personal about the game of basketball either. So yeah, but anyways, she knew that I loved it when the crowd got going and started the F Brad chants, F Brad, this or that. And there's a moment on ESPN where they're talking about her being there and how the crowd was treating her and yeah. And I had just gotten fouled and I was shooting free throws and they're chanting, F Brad, F Brad, and I'm shooting a free throw and I make the free throw and they flash to her and she's looking at the crowd going like this, because she knew that I would feed off of it. So it was like her way of, being with me on the court, which that's how you got a good and perfect gift from above in terms of a wife when she's doing that in enemy territory. But for her, that's not
Yeah.
enemy territory. That's home.
That's
So even though she got a lot of hate from Indiana fans that night and the week after, she earned a lot of respect from Wisconsin faithful, but just from my friends and my family and my teammates
yeah.
and coaches. They're like, yeah, she's a ride or die. And I think everyone after that game was like, yeah, they got to find themselves a Tyra Bust, now a Tyra Davison. So that was a cool
100%.
moment, cool game for us for many
100%.
reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, that was one of my favorite games to watch as a fan from your career. And yeah, it sounds like you guys are two peas in a pod, especially that two competitors. I love that that she embraced it as well. But uh, yeah, so that's one of my favorite games that I saw you play. But how about you give me your three favorite games from your career in Madison?
My three favorite games. First, I will go to another game at Indiana, but it was my junior year, the last game before COVID actually canceled our season. And we were on a winning streak. We'd won 7 games in a row, and we were going at Indiana, and we had to win the game to win the Big Ten, last game of the regular season. And they had to win the game they're like on the bubble, so like that would kind of, if they were to beat us, they'd probably get them in. If they were
Hmm.
to lose, it would be a little tougher. And we were down by 7 or 8 with just a few minutes to go, and we stormed all the way back, got the win at the end. One of those games where we had like 8 guys that all scored 10 points. Like
Hmm.
everyone was involved, everyone did their job, and like we accomplished a goal. And it felt so good because we had been through a lot of turmoil and tragedy that season and the summer before that really bonded our team together. And that was a really special moment and a special game. So that's one of them. Another one, um, in the NCAA tournament, we played North Carolina during
Let's go.
COVID at Mackey Arena. I had never won in Mackey Arena, and it was my first win in Mackey Arena. It was the last like Big Ten arena I needed to win in. Unfortunately, it wasn't against Purdue, so it didn't count at the time.
Yeah.
But to beat North Carolina and was like a dream come true for me because I grew up a Duke fan growing up. My dad and my grandpa were Duke fans growing up, so North Carolina was kind of always that other school. Like growing up in the backyard, North Carolina was a school that I was playing in my head, 3-2-1 in the backyard. So to have an opportunity to play against Roy Williams, which actually ended up being the last game of his career at Mackey Arena, that was a really cool moment for me personally, just in terms of like my childhood and thoughts growing up. And then the last one would be our home game against Purdue, my super senior year when Chucky hit a backboard buzzer beater. Purdue was such a great team, and that's actually the second time that we got Purdue that year. And to win the Big Ten, so special. Those moments, rushing the floor, holding the trophy, being up there with your teammates and coaches, and that was really a validating experience for me because I had a big decision to make. Not just me, but me and my wife and family in terms of going back for my fifth year or what God had in store for us. And so that was just such an encouragement and such a blessing that I'm so grateful for was that fifth year. And to have that moment with my teammates and coaches and family and then the university to celebrate a championship that year that was so special. I could just keep going down the line, but those three hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, against well, first off, I'll say your fifth year. I just want to say this. I don't really have a question that goes along with it, but I thought you were one of the best shooters in the country your fifth year. You finished around 35% from three, but outside of that cold stretch in February, yeah, the way you were hitting threes and the difficulty, because I mean, truthfully, that team didn't have a lot of shooting or depth coming off the bench that can shoot at a high rate. That's just the reality of it. So it's not like you were getting easy looks. Like you were running around everywhere, curling off into the corner, hand in your face. And a game I remember was the Wisconsin Marquette game that I was at, and my buddy, he wasn't. I don't know why. It surprised me that he wasn't, but he wasn't a big fan of yours, and he was standing next to me. And when you had a few of those where you're curling off into the corner and you're shooting contested threes with a guy right in your hand on the move, and every time the shot would go up, you would say something. Oh, he really think, and then it doesn't finish because the shot went in. Like the way, yeah. And that was a great game you played against Marquette. But the way you were making your threes that season, I thought you were one of the best shooters in the country because it was a really they weren't easy looks. They were on the move, and yeah. And then you were obviously you ended up taking the 3-point record that year, but I just want to throw that out there that I think that year you were one of the best shooters in the country. If you just look kind of beyond just the stats, if you look at what you were doing on the court, but that performance against North Carolina, you got really hot. Do you take credit or responsibility for Roy Williams retiring right after that?
No, I'm sure COVID probably had a bigger COVID, all sorts of other things with college basketball. I can't. I'm not taking credit for that. I'm not touching it. All my buddies will say that, and they'll give me grief about it. But no, and as someone that wants to be a college basketball coach, there's certain coaches that you grow up watching, and again, being a Duke fan, you watch that rivalry, and it was so cool to see him on the sidelines and to shake his hand, and for him to tell you, great game, you're a great player, and to say that he's enjoyed my career. Just those little interactions mean so much. So I'm not taking credit for it at all, but it was an honor to be, to share a court with a coaching legend like that. And so, yeah, special times.
And you said you grew up a Duke fan. It is kind of hard for me to fathom, especially probably 6, 7 years ago. But you were probably rooting for Duke against Wisconsin in that national championship game. That's hard to stomach. Wisconsin's
Yeah,
favorite son.
so growing up in Minnesota, I played AAU basketball for Howard Pulley, which is our Minnesota's Nike team. And Tyus Jones played for Howard Pulley, and his younger brother Trey Jones was one of my best friends growing up.
Sure.
So just getting to know them and doing life with them, playing with them,
Yeah.
spending a lot of time in the summer, it's like cheering for family. And so
Yeah.
watching
No,
family.
you have to.
With that being said, Wisconsin was always one of my favorite teams growing up because I did have season tickets to the Gophers, so I went to a lot of Big Ten basketball games.
Sure.
And Wisconsin, they have been cream of the crop, in the Big Ten, and I always really admired the way they played and obviously had great success. And I always wanted to play in the Big Ten, so it was like my two favorite teams going against each other. But I had a really good relationship with Tyus and Trey and the whole Jones family. And they're such great people. So yeah, I was definitely tuned into the game.
No, it's understandable. Just like your wife in Indiana, like you gotta do what you gotta do, 100%. But something I love in sports obviously is a great rivalry. Whether you got Magic versus Larry Bird, Yankees, Red Sox, or Brad Davison and Bo Borowski. What was that all about? We're a few years past that. Just tell me, what were your thoughts on that?
It was incredible. It was really incredible because it's something that kind of just happened. It's something that just happened. I think about all of my, I don't know what the word would be, confrontational moments or things that stick out, and he was involved in a lot of them.
Yeah,
He
he
found his way
was.
into a lot of those pictures, and I think he was a really good referee, so therefore he got to do a lot of big games, and we were a really good team, so therefore we were always in big games, and so that's probably how it happens so frequently. Um, but it's amazing how something happens, and then maybe one or two things happen, then it becomes a thing with social media and whatnot. And I just remember after every game that there was Bo Borowski and I was playing, I would just be flooded with tweets and messages and all these different things, nitpicking different things that I did or he did, or going back and forth. And I never really had a moment with him in terms of good or bad. It was just always kind of
Oh, not to cut you off, but how about when he stepped over you like Allen Iverson against the Lakers on that three against Ohio State, and he's kicks his leg out like four
nothing
times
in
while he's
terms
running
of
down.
verbally between the two of us. Nothing
Okay.
verbally. Now, again, if you want to go back and look at different things that happened, where you could, if you want to take that stance, there's quite a few different things that could have possibly
Yeah.
happened. Uh, but I'm not in the business of the perception is reality because I've been on the other side of it, and I think it's a bunch of BS in my opinion. So, because there was nothing verbally ever between me and him directly, I don't know what it was about. Years of perspective later, it seems so silly to me, but during the times, it definitely felt like a real thing was going on there.
Yeah, and for people who don't remember what happened with just Brad and Bo, whenever Brad would breathe incorrectly, they were reviewing it on the monitors. I believe in 2021, heading into March, Wisconsin was about. I have it here. They were 2-8 with Bo Borowski, Brad's first senior year. 2-8 with Bo Borowski reffing and 14-3 without him. Obviously, a lot of that wasn't Bo because no offense, but you guys had like a lot of 5 and 6 minute scoring droughts that year, so we can't blame it all on Bo. But that is an interesting stat. Um, but yeah, that was always something. And what's funny is one of my buddies is pursuing being a ref, and he's actually like doing a really good job. And Bo's not refing anymore, and I believe Bo has this app and this program. And my buddy like knows Bo Borowski, and I always try to, or a few years ago, I would say, I would try to like get some juice out of him, and he
You should
wouldn't budge.
give him my number so we can settle it. See what we're
Yeah,
going.
yeah, settled it. Yeah, no,
I
I
do
love it.
I do in terms of I remember people talking about that record, and I do remember just going to the monitor all the time, all the time,
Yeah,
all the time, and in
yeah.
a lot of ways, like felt targeted in terms of like, what are we doing?
You were,
So
you were.
maybe it was just because we had him in a lot of games. That I'll say that, but yeah, it happened a lot.
Wait, so I'm going to ask you this next question. Which team in the Big Ten was outside of Minnesota? They don't count, but it felt extra good to defeat on a personal basis. And then I'll flip it around and ask you a question as a Brad Davison fan. Which team do you think I really wanted you to beat? I just that's what I got for you.
Uh, yeah, Minnesota was always a big game, right? Because it's like going home
Yeah.
and you grew up a fan. Um, I think Michigan State was always a
Okay.
really big game because, again, like Tom Izzo, I have so much respect for Tom Izzo.
Yeah.
And again, he's one of those, for me, like Mount Rushmore coaches. So anytime you get the opportunity to play against Michigan State, and they just had incredible teams, right? So much talent. And so whenever you got a chance to do that, and I have similar feelings with Purdue because they were so good, Matt Painter. So those two, just because of a sheer like respect and talent and situation. For
Neither
me,
one of those
I'm
are the teams
probably
I'm thinking of
yeah. The teams you're thinking of,
that I wanted Brad to beat,
me
that I wanted
personally,
you.
or for me personally.
Yeah, for you to
That felt
beat.
good.
Me living
I really,
vicariously through you.
yeah. Uh, Iowa, Michigan, and Marquette would be the three teams that I always wanted to beat a little more
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Those are three of the teams that come to mind for me.
So the one that I really wanted you to beat was Iowa.
Yeah,
I think those games just had a little extra something to it because Fran was the one who always, whenever you breathed incorrectly, he was always asking for the monitors, and same with his son Connor. And Brad's not endorsing this, but Connor McCaffrey might be my least favorite college trooper of all time. Like Brad's not endorsing that. Brad's not endorsing that's fully
not at
me.
all, not
But
at all.
I'm not a big fan. I think I'm really disappointed in Caitlin Clark's choice in a significant other. I think that's a shame. But yeah, just between I like back in the day, you used to be able to see what people liked on Twitter. Like I remember he liked a few anti Brad Davison tweets. I do remember that. And yeah, just for all the whining, they really whined a lot. And unfortunately, you guys like there was a lot of close games where they won. In
Yeah,
2021.
my fourth year, they got us three times in really
Yeah,
close games and back and forth. They beat us in the Big Ten tournament. Outside of that year, and Luka Garza was a stud. Luka Garza
yeah,
was a handful for us. Outside of that year, I think we probably had their number more so than they did.
yeah,
That year, they definitely got us.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of good battles, a lot of good memories and not so good memories. But yeah, it was always fun competition. But yeah, that always felt a little better to beat them.
Sure. Yeah. So it's just for me, that's the one where it's like just after all the reviews, that was the one where I was just like, I really want Wisconsin to win that game. And yeah, just seeing I'm almost done here with you. But oh, and something I'll also throw out there is I also felt like your defense. I also felt like your defense. I would have liked to have seen you have made, especially in your fifth year. I would have liked to have seen you have made the All Big Ten defensive team. You know, Showalter made it, Gosser made it, and obviously you're kind of somewhat I think you were better, but it's a different mold or similar mold to them and the glue guy, but you had a little more diversity to your game. But I would have liked to have seen that, and I thought your performance against Iowa State in your last game defensively was really good. I thought they were going to throw Johnny on Brockington, and then they threw you on him, and you did a really good job on him. But just like impactful plays, like sometimes stuff that doesn't meet the stat sheet, whether it's charges, but you also had stuff that hit the stat sheet. Like I think you had like 4 steals. You got like multiple of their players in foul trouble. So that's another thing is I would have liked to have seen you make an All Big Ten defensive team because you made impactful plays. And then to anyone who gives you a hard time about taking charges, you would have taken a charge if Zion Williamson was running down the lane. Like you put your body out there. I never agree that you flopped. I always thought that you were just willing to put your body on the line and do whatever it took to win. Did you have any thoughts about that? About how people would sometimes try labeling you as a flopper?
Yeah, looking back on it, the game that really got me in terms of in the public eye and this flopping charge thing was my sophomore year home game, NC State.
Yeah.
I took 5 charges. 4 of them were in the second half. It was on ESPN. We were rolling. It was a big. They were undefeated. I think like it was a very high profile game. And I took 5 in that game, and one of them was like kind of in like an isolation ball screen with
Mm.
6 to go, close
Yeah.
game. And I took a charge, and they called it a charge, and I think it was a charge. I mean, I didn't fly; I just got hit in the chest, took a normal charge. And I say because of that game, I took a lot of charges in my career, but because of that game, I bet you I had 50 more charges that were called blocks the rest of
Yeah.
my career just because there was no way that they were going to let someone take more than 2 charges in a game without, calling a block. I think after that game, it became well, he already got one, so we can't give him another. Whether it was a charge or not, it was just kind of a pre-decided thing. So that's the one thing that I think happened. But I remember after that game, everybody was talking about if this was good for the game of basketball or not, and it was on
Yeah. Bomani
Colin
Jones.
Howard, ESPN shows. It was like on a. I remember watching SportsCenter growing up, and it had like a ticker on the side of like
Yeah.
what was to be talked about, and like one of them was like "Our charge is good" or something like, and it was just a picture. It was just like like a Ball is Life mixtape, but just of me taking charges. And I
Yeah.
got to be kidding me. Like, I did not ask for this. I did not want this. And I remember just being under the limelight for 3 weeks. Like after that game, I didn't get a charge call for weeks. And I remember coach was always yelling about it, and I was always saying something. And I think that in terms of the charges, to me, okay, a a, a charge for a 6'3" white guy that's not going to go dunk the ball or dunk on somebody. The equivalent of a dunk on offense to like get the crowd going, get the bench up. That's a charge on defense. So that was my way, of making an energy or a vibe or a momentum
Yeah.
play. And yeah, it got a bad rep. And it got a bad rep. I point to that NC State game because of how it happened. Because like the Cole Center went crazy because it was like a game of defensive
Yeah.
play. Like, but because it was a charge and it was my fifth one, they're just cheering for charges and they're just putting themselves in front of people not playing defense. Where me growing up, it was taught, it was coached, it was rewarded, it was what you're supposed to do. So yeah, that was quite the situation.
Yeah, did guard ever tell you to take it easy on the charges because that was going on with the refs, where they were, even if it wasn't charged, they'd probably call it a block because it was you? Did guard ever say, "Hey, fall back here"?
Yeah, yeah, and it wasn't. It was never communicated like that. It was more, Brad. We need you on the floor, and you can't be in foul trouble. So you need to be smart in terms of know how many fouls you have, know the time and score, know the situation. If you've already gotten one, be very certain about the second. Yeah, we definitely had those. We definitely had those conversations in
Sure.
a.
Yeah, and the playing professionally, to wrap this up, playing professionally was never the goal for you. You said your goal was always to be a coach. That playing at a high level in Division 1, that was your peak for you. But obviously, you chose to play professionally. I believe you got married in summer 2022, right after the season. I remember seeing that. So, was there a conflict with your schedule between playing, between just getting married, the honeymoon, the whole process, and playing in the NBA Summer League?
Yeah, so when summer league was going on, I was on my honeymoon. I was in
Okay.
which was the best decision ever. Had the
Yeah.
greatest time with my wife. Yeah, so how that thought process went is when the season got over, we were going to take some time. Just obviously, we had a big summer coming up with our wedding, honeymoon, bachelor parties, bachelorette parties,
Yeah.
moving out to Wisconsin. Figuring out what was next for our life, and we just decided when the season was over, we were going to take a couple weeks and just say, hands and heart open, we're going to make some plans for our life and ultimately trust that God's going to establish those steps. And so, just after some honest conversations with my wife, the two things that we wanted to prioritize most, number one is we wanted to get married this summer. So that was what we were going to do, regardless of what our next steps looks like. And then number two, we wanted to be living underneath the same roof and value and prioritize doing life together in our first year of marriage, just to set the foundation and to value what we wanted to value. And so then after looking at the options, because she was coaching at the time, and I went through the process of going to the NBA workouts, and that was a really, really fun process for me, getting to compete in those and talk to the coaches and whatnot. And so I had some opportunities to play in summer league and Exhibit 10 contracts and that. But at the same time, my agent was looking at overseas opportunities, and so my wife and I decided that if we go overseas, we were number one priority again. We wanted to live together, and number two, we wanted to both play. And so that was kind of the overseas route, and then the NBA route would have been an Exhibit 10 contract, traveling around in the G League probably for most of the season, hoping for a shot or to get called up, and she would have probably still coached to make it work. And we looked at that situation, and it didn't really seem like we'd have that much time together. And that, again, that was our number one priority. Where you look at the other options of going overseas, us both playing,
Yeah.
incredible amount of quality time. And so that's why we went that direction. And we just had open conversations, a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time just open hands, open heart of like, this is what we're thinking. Where do you want us to go? Lead us based on these things that we think that we should be valuing and prioritizing. And so that's how we made that decision to go overseas. Now you alluded to also playing professionally was never really my goal or something that I've had on this vision board or anything like that. I've always just wanted to into get into the college coaching ranks and start my career there. But after that last year, I still had such a drive to compete, and I still just loved the competition. And there was opportunities where you could get into the coaching ranks and start getting coaching experience. But at the same time, coaching will always be there, where there's a little bit more of a shelf life to playing. And even though
Yeah.
you're playing, you're still getting a lot of basketball experience. So I feel like I'm learning a ton. I think I'm improving as a player. I'm spending a lot of time with my wife, which is just amazing. And we've had so much fun these last 2 years, 3 years. Excited to spend all the time with my wife and daughter now coming up pretty
Let's
soon.
go.
But even through all that, like these last 2.5 years since graduating from Wisconsin, I'm becoming a better coach, and my mindsets, my perspective, my values, my beliefs in terms of life and the game of basketball are still growing, and are taking form and taking shape. So I'm over here. I'm not trying to play as long as I can. I'm playing until there's
Okay.
an opportunity that my wife and family are excited about to go back and start that career when the time comes, God willing.
Okay, so you answered one of the last two questions I had with your timeline, and then I will say you are playing really well overseas. You had a recent 6 for 6 game from three, shooting 46% from three so far this season. Last year you had a great year shooting the ball 40%. Could we ever see a push towards the NBA, or that's just not what you want to do?
It's not in my plans. It's not something that like I have my sets on. Obviously, if you play well over here, overseas, you have opportunities in both routes, depending on where you want to go, what level you want to be at, what league you want to play in. So never say never again, because you can always go to the G League and work your way up. You can get a two-way contract if that's what you choose to do, and if that's the opportunity you have. For us, we love it overseas. I love the competition. I don't know how familiar you are with the overseas style of basketball, but it's much more similar to a Big Ten basketball game than to an NBA basketball game.
Sure.
NBA is a little bit more catered towards entertainment and offense and space and scoring, where over here it's a little bit more about physicality, restricted space, not much room. There's not very many fouls called over here.
Sure.
You're allowed to. So, like some of the main rules, NBA defensive 3 seconds is a rule, so that creates a lot of space. Hand checks and being able the ability to touch drivers and ball handlers in the NBA is a lot more limited than over here, and there's no defensive 3 seconds. So everything here is like this. Cutters are getting hit. It's a little bit like a
Yeah.
big style, which I love. We play 35 games, so one game a week, like a football schedule, and every game matters. Every game matters. Where you're not playing 82 games, you can take a game off here, a game off there, which that's not the vibe over here. So it's definitely more a style that I enjoy. It's much more
Okay.
a style that my game is catered towards than the NBA by a long shot. So that's not in our plans. That's not a goal of mine by any means necessary. But never say never.
That's fair. I just think if Delhi could do it, Dellavedova, if he could do it with his form, I mean, you never know. You
There
never
you
know.
go. There you go.
But yeah. So Brad, I appreciate your time. It's late where Brad is. We're approaching 10 o'clock where it is with him, so we gotta let him go. But before you go, quick rapid fire round. Thank you so much once again for your time. But
Got
first
it.
question I got for you here is, who is the best player in the world right now?
Best player in the world right now, in a very unique way, Nikola Jokic.
Agreed. MJ or LeBron?
MJ.
Jake Paul or Mike Tyson? Who's winning that?
Mike Tyson.
Okay. Toughest player you've ever had to guard?
In college, I always say Carson Edwards because of the amount of screens Purdue ran him off, and he jumped halfway to my head every time he shot the ball.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Favorite food?
Steak.
Favorite movie?
Mm. Coach Carter.
Okay. I'll go favorite Christian musical artist.
Favorite Christian musical artist? KB would be my pregame Christian rapper to listen
All
to.
right. All right. Favorite lift in the gym.
Front squat.
Is Wisconsin going to make the NCAA tournament this year?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give me a seed prediction? Like above or below 6?
Oh, you set the. I said 6. You set the line at a good spot.
Let's go.
I hope below.
All right. What was the toughest loss you experienced as a player?
Whew. Iowa State my last year.
Sure. And then what as a fan?
As a fan, my toughest loss as a fan. Okay, I'm gonna go a different route. Any Minnesota Vikings playoff loss. I mean, it never fails. So those are heartbreaking for me.
All right, last few. Favorite cheat day meal?
In the States, Chick-fil-A.
All right. What's your favorite season and why?
Summer, family, friends, golfing, fishing, tough to beat.
All right, funniest teammate you've ever had?
Khalil Iverson, I'll give him a shout out.
All right, and then last question. If you could have dinner with any person right now on the planet, who would it be?
Tony Bennett, would love to hear his perspective on life, basketball, college basketball. I would love to sit down and have dinner with Tony Bennett right now.
All right, let's go. That's Brad Davison. Brad, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, looking forward to staying connected moving forward.
You got it. Appreciate you having me on.